our special Onkaparinga Libraries Science Week session. This one is all about how you can become a beach detective. And this was our idea of how we could celebrate our marine environment for Science Week. So what we're going to show you is a video of what we did when we went to Port Willunga Beach and we learned all about how to be beach detectives. So I asked Matt lots of questions and hopefully it will help you know how you can be a beach detective too. And don't forget that whilst you're watching the video, if you go into the Q&A section on your screen, you can post some questions to us and we'll try our very best to answer them at the end of the video. So we hope you enjoy it and get those questions sent in for us and we'll try our very best to answer them. Here it comes.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us for Science Week this year. This year we're celebrating our marine environments with the City of Onkaparinga Libraries, and today I've got a special guest with me. Matt is going to tell us all about how to become a beach detective. Would you like to be a beach detective? What is a beach detective, Matt?
Well, a beach detective is a person who looks around the beach to find out what has happened here. So there's so many things to find. You might find signs of animals, signs of marine plants, you might find signs of people. And so we try to put together the story of what has happened here.
Wow, that sounds very exciting, doesn't it? So Matt's got some things to show us that he's been able to find on the beach to tell us a bit about the past. What have you managed to find, Matt?
Here's an imprint from an ancient cockle shell. You might have seen cockle shells that people use for baits for fishing. This one was up to 40 million years old. And if you're really, 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 really lucky and you look really, really carefully, one day you might find something like this. This is a fossil shark tooth from an ancient mako shark that swam here 32 million years ago called Isaurus histalis. Imagine finding that.
So we've learned all about fossils that we can find on the beach that are millions of years old, but is there anything else that we can find on the beach, Matt?
Absolutely. There's things that washed up just today and they can tell the story of what's happened here just today. We have a crab claw from a sand crab. We have sponges. This one, and 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 even this one. There's so many different types. And did you know that a sponge isn't actually a plant? It's actually an animal. And some other things that have washed up from a long time ago. We've got a chunk of coal. I wonder if that could have been from the Star of Greece. And maybe this bit of porcelain. Is that a plate or a cup that's washed up on the beach as well? And what's this? Is it a plant or an animal? It's actually a plant. So it's a seagrass that's bundled up and washed around in a tiny little hole and bundled and tangled itself together and then eventually washes up on the beach. Sometimes after a storm, you'll find hundreds of these in different shapes and sizes washed ashore. And sometimes, if you look very closely, you might even find a tiny little seahorse washed up. You'd have to look very closely to find one of those.
So we've learned lots of exciting ways to be beach detectives and look for clues. Is there anything else that we can look for clues and find out about the past, Matt?
Absolutely. So we've got this amazing layer here of ochre that's been deposited down in the rock. And this whole area was very significant for the local Ghana people, the traditional owners of this area. And the ochre band here goes all the way to Hallett Cove. And this is the wreck of the Ida, which is a ship that washed ashore here in 1857. So there's two wrecks on this beach. There's the Star of Greece and this one. This one's much older by some years than the Star of Greece.
Our big backyard packs are available to collect from your local Onkaparinga library, and you can start your beach detective adventure.
I hope you enjoyed watching our video. We've got some fabulous questions that have come through from Mrs. Gregory's class in Galilee Primary School. So the first question that we've got here is, how did the Ida shipwreck get on the beach? And that's from somebody called Eden. Do you know the answer to that question, Matt?
That is a great question, Eden. And from what I know, the Ida was a wooden sailing ship that was moored off the beach at Port Willunga. And on the night of the 15th of June, 1857, there was a huge storm which washed the ship onto the beach. Now, over time, the wreck has actually settled and pulled apart into lots of different pieces, and some of those pieces have washed away. The remaining part that we can see in the sand is the front prow of the boat. And over many, many years, it's settled further and further into the sand. And so now it's only in winter that those storms uncover the front that we can see there today.
Wow, so I hope that answers your question, Eden. That's a lot of information that Matt knows about that. That's excellent. We've also got a question here from Daly, who's also in Mrs. Gregory's class, and it says, when is the best time to find things on the beach?
Now, that is a great question, Daly. So probably the best time to find things on the beach, there's two great times to find things on the beach. So the first one is high tide, when the water is all the way in. And if you look right behind my shoulder here, you can see the high tide line of all of the seaweed up there. So that's the highest point that the water comes in. And at low tide is the other time is when the water all goes out and leaves all the debris behind. So at very low tide, you can also go and find things in rock pools on the areas of the beach as well. If you want to know when those times are, you can actually look them up on the internet. If you do a look for the tide times at your local area, because they're different times every day, but you can predict them way into the future. So you can know what the tide's going to be doing next week or even next year if you really want to plan out your beach combing adventure.
That's great. So that's another tip for being a great beach detective, is knowing the best times to go onto the beach to find all those little treasures that tell you about the past. So another question we've got here is, what types of crabs live at Port Willunga Beach? And that was from Xanthi.
So Xanthi. So there's lots of different types of crabs. I don't know all of them. I think that would be a really nice research project for someone. And I think you could find a lot of it out through your local Natural Resource Management Board website as well. But the two major crabs that I know of is that you'd find in the rocks, you'd find red bait crabs. And they're the ones that would be hunched under a rock, and you often see them curled right up, and they just scuttle back under just as you see. They don't want anything to do with anybody because they're worried that you might be there to eat them. The other types of crabs that you might find if you're really, really lucky is hermit crabs. So that's a small crab that lives inside a shell that it finds on the beach. And it's they actually get reasonably large, maybe this big. And they, every time they grow a little bit, they have to move into a different size shell, a larger shell. So looking along again at low tide in the rock pools is a fantastic time to find them.
Very exciting, all the things that you can find on the beach. So go out and have a look. Now the next question I've got is, how long does it take to make a fossil? And that's from Adrian. Wow.
Well, let's see. I would say the short answer is a very, very, very long time. Fossils, the way that they're formed is by sand and silt sort of layering over the top of that object, whether it be a bone or a shell or whatever it might be. And over time, that sand or that clay hardens and eventually becomes rock. So that process takes millions of years to happen. And so that's why we're very lucky that as those millions of years happen and the rock layers up one layer at a time, we can see the different years, I suppose, preserved in that rock. And particularly the cliffs at Port Willunga and Aldinga are fantastic places to see that layering and the shell layers within that.
Fantastic. I hope you got lots of information from that answer, Adrian. Now, another question we've got here from Mrs. Gregory's class is from Caden, and the question is, how many eggs does a shark lay?
Well, now this is a really interesting one, and again, I know a little bit about this one, but I don't know everything there is to know. So I don't know who does. But probably a good place to start is when we were watching our short video there on beach detectives. In our objects that we had in our pile, we had a Port Jackson shark egg, which was that dark coloured object that looked a little bit like a corkscrew. Now, that's from a Port Jackson shark that actually lays that egg. The mother takes that egg in her mouth and actually rolls over and screws that egg into a gap in the rocks to hold it where it should be. This is underwater. So then the baby shark actually hatches out of that egg eventually and is able to swim away. So in short, a Port Jackson shark, it lays one egg at a time. I'm not sure how many they lay in a season, but it might be one. There are other sharks that give birth to live young as well, but that's a whole other story.
Well, I can actually help a little bit with that answer, because if there's something that you want to find out that maybe you don't know the answer to, you can always come to your library and we can find books that can help you to find the answers to those questions. So although Matt knows heaps about it, we've also got, you might not have Matt on hand to answer questions for you. So you can go to your local library and have a look and see what books you can find that might tell you the answers. And we've got heaps. I'm going to show you a few that we've got that you can come in and borrow. You can come and get off the shelves. We've got wonderful books about the beach. We've got stories about the beach. We've also got amazing books that look like this, all about fish. So this might be a good place to start to find out a bit more about sharks if you're interested. And we also have these amazing packs that are all about litter and dumping and all sorts of things that you can do to try and protect your marine environment. So we've got some questions that have come up on the screen as well. The first question that we've got here is from Andy, and it says, Matt, how do you know all this?
Well, you know how I know all this? Because I spend a lot of time at my local library. Look, I've had a long interest in things that happen on the seashore. And I think, in short, I've listened to a lot of people who know a lot more about it than I do. And when I've had the opportunity, I've listened to things like we're doing today. If you're always ready to listen and always ready to learn and always ready to go out and use your ears and eyes, it's amazing what you can pick up. And remember, and don't forget, like, my beard is grey, so I've had a long time to remember to find out all this information to remember it. So I did not find it all out yesterday.
Okay, so we've also got another question here. I think it's something about sea animals, and were they dead when they were on the shore?
Well, that's the thing about the shoreline, because most of the things that we see on the beach are things that have either broken away from the places that they normally live on the bottom of the ocean. And as the waves come in, often after a big storm, it washes certain animals up onto the beach. Oftentimes they've already died and they float around in the sea for a long time and gradually come up onto the beach and are left there to dry out and to be found. So most animals that end up on the beach have already died, unfortunately, but there are plenty more of those alive in the sea. So it gives you a great opportunity, though, to find a small piece of what might be living out there in the ocean. Because the things we see on that high tide line just there is only a tiny fraction of what's actually existing out under the waves. And if you get a chance, maybe one day go for a snorkel or a swim. And you never know what you might see. You might see some of those animals in their natural habitats, alive and well and functioning.
So we've got a lovely comment there that's come through from Harry saying, he's very clever. Yes, Matt is very clever. He does know a lot of information. Now, also, if you've enjoyed our beach detective session, you can come into your local library and come and get one of these Our Big Backyard activity packs, because they've got heaps of ideas of all sorts of other things that you can go out and enjoy on the beach, but also other parts of your local area that you can enjoy, and lots of great activities. And you can pick up, there's packs that are for Salix Beach area, and there's also ones that are for Christie's. So if you're further away, there should be a pack that relates to your area too, that you can get out and enjoy all these lovely outdoor activities and learn lots, and maybe one day know as much as Matt. Who knows?
Well, in those packs as well, there's lots of information around activities, particularly say the beach detectives activities we did. There's lots of links at the bottom of those so you can find out more. One of them obviously is to come to your local library and talk to the staff here and get them to point you in the right direction.
And there's lots of links to other websites that can give you great information on the natural world out there as well.
Now, I had a question as well, Matt. So if you're interested in looking after the coastline and trying to protect it, because it's so beautiful, we want to protect it and keep it safe and look after all of these animals, what other things can we do to help with that?
There are some really, really important things that you can do. The first thing that you can do is to, when you're at home, is to look after the things that go down your drains. So to make sure that we don't send contaminated water out into the sea, to make sure that your rubbish stays in your bins, and to make sure that when you're out and about that you put your rubbish in the bin. The second thing that you can do that's really important is when you are on the beach and you're looking around and you're looking along those high tide lines and in amongst the weeds, as if you might find pieces of plastic or litter or sometimes fishing line or string. If you pick those things up, put them in your pocket, and when you leave the beach, there's always a bin there. You can pop them in the bin on the way off, and that stops those bits of plastic from getting tangled around birds' legs or being swallowed by fish or any other marine animals out there. That's some really important ones. And the third thing you can do, if you're feeling really, really passionate about this, is you can go out and you can join your local coast care group. So there are groups up and down our coast, all the way around Australia, who they get together and they volunteer to do activities that keep our coast clean, to keep our coast looking great, to keep the vegetation around our coast looking as good as it can, and to protect the animals that live on it. And I'd say there's one more if you're in South Australia, and particularly if you're on the Fleurieu Peninsula, is to get involved with the Hooded Plover Project, which is all about some tiny little birds with a black head that nest right on the sand, and they would nest, if I point over here where Sarah and I are standing, right behind us on just above the high tide line is where they like to lay their eggs. And so they're very vulnerable to things like dogs and foxes and cats and people and vehicles. And so you can do some work with the Hooded Plover Project to record where you've seen birds and to keep an eye on them, and so that we can count them and monitor their success and look after them when they're breeding. How does that sound?
So that's plenty of ideas to keep you busy and keep you looking after our beautiful coastline here. We are so lucky to have such wonderful beaches and so many fabulous things that we can discover. So heaps of ideas. And
I just noticed I've got something from Harry down here. Harry's asked, have you ever mistaken a plastic bag for a jellyfish? Yes. And it's an easy mistake to make. When you're walking along the beach, you might see something that either looks like a plastic bag and you think you should pick it up, but it turns out to be a jellyfish, or you might see something you think is a jellyfish and it turns out to be a plastic bag. Either way, it's always worth giving something a poke to make sure, because if it is a plastic bag, it'd be fantastic to take it away. And one of the great reasons for that is because there's a whole lot of animals that actually live out in the ocean that eat jellyfish. And to them, a plastic bag and a jellyfish floating in the ocean can look exactly the same. And they can actually swallow a plastic bag, which is particularly bad for them. One thing I'd say about jellyfish, if you see a jellyfish on the beach, maybe in the high tide line or even just floating around in the shallows, the jellyfish that we have down south here in the southern part of Australia are generally harmless. They might have a little sting. It's a little prickly sting, but it's nothing like this jellyfish you may have heard of that live in the northern part of Australia sometimes. So our jellyfish are friendly, they're fine, they're beautiful creatures if you ever get the chance to watch one in the water. They're nothing to be scared of. So, but I still wouldn't recommend picking them up and handling them. Just have a look from a safe distance, like all animals that you might see on the seashore, is look, try not to disturb, and don't touch unless you really have to.
Some good tips there for you, Harry. And yeah, so it's good to know that we can do things to help the environment, just even if you don't get involved in these projects that Matt's suggesting. Just keeping an eye out for litter on the beach is a great way to start by helping the animals and helping keep our environment safe and clean for all of us. Has anybody got any more questions? We'd love to have some questions before we end our session today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're also enjoying all the other Science Week online activities that Onkaparinga Libraries have had. So make sure that there's a few more to come. So get in touch with us, get in touch with your local library, go on the website, follow us on Facebook, and you can find out all about the other activities that you can get involved with. Can we see any other questions coming through? I just want to say thank you for all of you for joining us this afternoon. It's really great to be able to share all this information, and also to have an excuse to go out and for me to learn lots more about how to be a beach detective and to be out in that beautiful weather that we experienced. So yeah, come down to your library, pick up one of our big backyard packs and get involved in those activities, and you can have as much fun as we did.
Absolutely. And the thing that I'd say about, if you want to know more about the beach or you want to know more about your natural environment, the best way to learn is to go. Now, if you're a kid, you can ask mum and dad to take you. If you're an adult, you can take your kids. It's a fantastic place to be. There's so many things you can find out. There's hours of fun and exploration that you can find. And I guarantee there's 100% that if you go, you'll see something you've never seen before every single time.
I certainly learned an awful lot from that when we went down to the beach, and noticed things that have been there the whole time but haven't looked closely enough to really understand what was going on there. So get down to the beach. So thanks very much again for joining us, and get involved with the other Science Week's activities that we've got going on for Onkaparinga Libraries, and we'd love to see you at the library. And if you see Matt out and about, don't forget to ask him some more questions because he knows heaps.
Maybe I do. See you, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.